Good morning. I am taking my cue from the fact that the music has stopped. We were just talking, how do I know when to start? No, never mind, we figured it out. Thank you. So good morning, and thank you all for being here. And before I get into the substance of the session, I'm going to share a bit of a story with you. I started as EDO at the end of July, and in September, Commissioner Hansen, who was chair at the time, decided that I am going to go with him to the General Conference. And I was thinking, the ADVANCE Act just came, and I have so many things to do. And I go to the General Conference, and I had the mindset of a few years ago, which is the last time I was thinking about international engagement, when sovereignty and individual risk appetite for countries were the dominant topic of discussion when it came to harmonization and setting standards. So I went to the General Conference, and after a few of the bilaterals and a few of the sessions that I was sitting in, I had this epiphany, right? I knew that the industry is about to embark on something new. You know, I didn't quite know what's new, but we were seeing the signs that things are happening, and we're thinking differently about nuclear energy domestically. But what struck me at the General Conference was the widespread interest. And I had this epiphany. Sometimes I'm slow. I'm sure most of you had that realization far before I did. But I had this realization that the next reactors that we are going to certify, maybe one or two are going to stay in this country, but the others are going to go over borders, overseas. They're just, so we need to start thinking differently. So with that in mind, I cannot tell you how proud I am to have been asked to chair this session, because licensing designs from now on is going to truly be an international endeavor. And if we can learn anything from these wonderful folk who are sort of leading the way with the BWRX 300, then that will be a wonderful thing. So that's the objective of the session. And before we talk to our great panelists, let me give a couple of housekeeping remarks, but let me start with a remark that's always very dear to me, which is to thank the myriad of people who are responsible for keeping the RIC going. And some of them are in the room now. So please, on your way out, just say thank you to them when you see them in the hallway or at the registration booth or just around the hallways. And with that, let me remind everybody that the Wi-Fi code is RIC 2025 with RIC all caps. I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody in this good crowd that we silence our electronic devices. I'll remember to do that as soon as I sit down. I will remind folk that the sessions are recorded. And with regard to Q&As, you can scan the QR code and ask your questions via that QR code. For virtual attendees, there is a box to the right of your screen with tabs for electronic Q&A. I haven't checked it. I hope I'm right. So with that, I'm not going to take any more time from our panelists. I'm going to sit down and introduce the first speaker. And the panelists already let me know that some of them are going to choose to sit down. Some of them are going to be at the podium. So just heads up that your eyes will need to wander a bit. Correction, they're all standing. So we'll start this panel with Greg Bowman, who, before I say anything else about him, I'm going to tell you that he is an amazing leader. So Greg is now serving as the Deputy Office Director for New Reactors in the Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation. He started his career as a reactor inspector and later a resident inspector in Region 1. He has been reactor engineer, senior enforcement specialist, executive technical assistant. He did all kinds of things throughout the agency. I was fortunate enough to have him reporting to me in his first supervisory position. Talk about sheer talent, he was able to cope with me. I've tried to bring Greg along wherever I had a chance. He's been in one capacity or another in my organization whenever I could arrange it. Anyways, I'm a very big fan of Greg's. Before he joined the NRC, he was a training engineer and supervisor for the Navy's Nuclear Power Training Unit in Charleston. He has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Virginia, and he's a graduate of our executive leadership program. Greg, please get us started.
Thanks, Mirella. So as Mirella mentioned, I'm Greg Bowman, Deputy Office Director for New Reactors at the NRC. So I'm going to run through some slides quickly to provide some context for the rest of the presentation. So why did we decide to collaborate? So we recognized several years ago that with the growing global interest in deployment of advanced technologies, advanced nuclear technologies, cooperation could provide benefits for all parties involved. That includes regulators, vendors, and applicants. In 2019, the heads of the CNSC and NRC signed a memorandum of cooperation on advanced reactor and small modular reactor technologies. And the goal of that memorandum of cooperation was to improve existing bilateral cooperation between the two agencies. The MOC was expanded last year to include the UK's Office of Nuclear Regulation. The agreement encompasses several types of projects, and that includes comparing approaches to reviews to support the development of shared approaches, collaborating on pre-licensing activities to ensure mutual preparedness, cooperating on research, training, and development of regulatory positions for unique issues, and finally, collaborating on actual licensing reviews. The Venn diagram on this slide shows some of the projects we're working on either bilaterally or trilaterally, and some that we're working on independently. You can have the next slide, please. How does the process work? So when a vendor and the regulators agree that a specific aspect of a design would benefit from collaboration, from a collaborative review, the vendor submits a product, such as a white paper or a topical report, to one or more of the regulators. The regulators review the document together and develop a joint report that identifies and addresses the similarities and differences between the requirements in each country and provides positions on the vendor's approach the agencies can agree to. Each regulator retains its independent authority to make licensing decisions, but the joint reports provide confidence to applicants of what is acceptable to each regulator, and the joint report can be referenced in future licensing reviews. In addition, the reports provide valuable information for the regulators considering the same, for other regulators considering the same designs. By leveraging each other's evaluations to approve a novel design feature or an exemption from requirements, that feature of the design can be standardized for deployment in participating countries. Next slide, please. Beyond joint reports, our collaboration has helped us in many ways. The first is training. We've been able to leverage different capabilities and experiences of each regulator to fill knowledge gaps that may exist. For example, we offered CNSC the same training courses in BWR technology that we offer our own staff to help increase their capabilities in reviewing applications for those reactor types. The NRC also had the benefit of observing operator certification exams in Canada to help us identify best practices and improve our own operator licensing program. We've also completed staff exchanges where inspectors from the NRC have integrated themselves in CNSC and vice versa for up to 3 months to help learn how the other country works, to gain insight into areas where our respective programs could be enhanced. One way we can gain efficiency in regulatory reviews is by leveraging previously accepted approaches for reviews. For example, in the area of fuel qualification for the BWRX 300, we were able to share insights into each other's reviews, saving weeks to months of technical review time between the regulators. Next slide. So one example of success is the collaboration on the BWRX-300 small modular reactor. This slide lists some of the projects we've been working on together for that review. The success of our collaboration on that project has been enabled by effective cooperation between the regulators, the reactor designer, GE Hitachi, and the utilities, Tennessee Valley Authority and Ontario Power Generation. The NRC, CNSC, and ONR meet regularly with GEH, TVA, and OPG to identify topics that would benefit from collaboration. The regulators compare their requirements and positions and work with the industry to identify ways in which a standardized design can meet requirements in all three countries. Overall, our collaboration under the Memorandum of Cooperation adds efficiency and rigor to each regulator's respective licensing process and is further enabling risk-informed decision-making and agility in each country. And with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Sarah, who is the birthday girl today, I might add. 27.
And by the way, at the end, we're all going to stand up and sing happy birthday. Happy birthday. I'm kidding.
I will say
but we can stay after and do it if you really want to.
we also can do it right now. Like, we could do it right now. We could all do it together. There's no place I'd rather be on my 44th birthday than right here at a panel at 8:30 at the Rick. So I'm so glad that you're all here with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So allow me to introduce Sarah, who is a joy to be around. So Sarah Jane Eaton is the Director General of the Directorate of Advanced Reactor Technologies at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, CNSC. She began her career there in 2009 as an inspector for uranium mines and mills. In 2021, she was appointed Director of Advanced Reactor Licensing. And in November 2023, Sarah became the Director General. The Director for Advanced Reactor Technology is responsible for licensing new nuclear reactors, pre-licensing activities, including vendor design review, and leading the new build readiness for CNSC. Sarah, all yours.
Thanks, Marilla. I think we'll go to the next slide. Only Greg got to present multiple slides. The rest of us will sort of speak to one slide, which is great because Greg's done a great job at sort of outlining where the collaboration came from and the benefits from it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Canada's doing with regards to novel technologies and new reactors, and then where the benefits that we see from this collaboration. And so when we look at today's landscape, the role of regulators is more crucial than ever. And so as novel technologies emerge, they bring both opportunities and also risk. And so we have to prioritize safety of these innovations to protect the public health, environment, et cetera. But we also have to ensure that we are as efficient as we possibly can. And so at the CNSC, we are committed to ensuring that we have the necessary people in place to be able to have the rigorous assessment processes, transparent communication, and the continuous monitoring to ensure that as we have these new technologies, whether they be small, medium, or large, that they meet the established safety standards. So in Canada, we're not talking about what we might do. We're not talking about what's in the future. We're in the middle of it right now. We are in the middle of, we've reviewed a license to construct application. We're expecting a decision to come in the upcoming months. And then we won't be talking about if a reactor is constructed, we'll be talking about when a reactor is constructed. And so our licensing process is comprehensive. I would say everyone on this panel would agree that all of our licensing process is comprehensive. And we've been able to leverage our early optional vendor design review process to identify any potential barriers to licensing. And there's been a lot of benefit in our collaboration with the US NRC on this. We've been able to collaborate on designs early pre-application status to be able to understand the design, but also to be able to understand where we may need to focus our efforts later should a license application come in. And so the vendor design review allows generally American designers to come have a better understanding of Canadian codes and standards, to be able to help them understand how to enter a license application space. We know that should our commission issue a construction license, the NRC and the ONR will be able to leverage the work that we have done for our construction application review to be able to take an approved design and deploy it elsewhere. So the pressure's on us to do the job right, and I can confidently say that I think we have. We've been very transparent, more transparent than we've ever been in our decision-making, in our technical review. You can look at every question we've asked Ontario Power Generation. You can see every response that they have provided. And I think that this ongoing technical review, our collaboration with our partners, has helped us build trust with the public and with Indigenous nations, which is crucial to new nuclear deployment. So how does international collaboration support risk-informed decision-making? In our view, international collaboration is the cornerstone of effective nuclear safety regulation. By working together, we share best practices, we harmonize safety standards, we leverage our collective expertise to address the complex challenge in front of us. Over the last 2 days, I've heard that regulators need to be quicker, more efficient. They need to respond to urgency. And we hear it. We hear it, we understand it. And it's not lost on us. And working together with like-minded regulators, like the NRC, like the ONR, will allow us to move quicker, to be better, while also ensuring an adequate level of safety. And through our memorandum of cooperation, we've been able to share information, to share insights, to challenge each other, to leverage from each other, and to gain alignment in our regulatory approaches.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Mark Foy. Mark was appointed Chief Executive and Chief Nuclear Inspector of the United Kingdom's Office for Nuclear Regulation on June 1st, 2021. He had previously served as ONR's Chief Nuclear Inspector since 2017. He is an executive board member of ONR and is the regulatory head of the organization, providing independent, authoritative, expert advice on nuclear safety, security, and safeguards to the ONR board, ministers, and parliament. During the last 20 years, Mark has successfully led ONR's regulation across various sectors in the nuclear industry, securing improvements in safety and security. Mark has 35 years of experience in UK's civil and defense nuclear industry, combined with extensive international experience. Most of you know Mark. Having undertaken various senior roles within the international regulatory community. He provides authoritative leadership and insights on nuclear safety and its regulation. Mark is a chartered fellow of the UK's Nuclear Institute and has honors degree in mechanical engineering. Mark.
Thank you, Mirella. I will have to shorten that for future meetings. As national regulators, we've got to recognise that we work in a very different world and environment from when we first started our reactor programs 40 or 50 years ago. The US, Canada, and the UK are actually a great example of how nuclear programs developed separately all those years ago. 3 different nuclear technologies form the basis of those national programs: light water reactor technology in the US, heavy water technology in Canada, and gas-cooled reactor technology in the United Kingdom. So we all went different routes, all regulated within our own national boundaries under separate regulatory regimes. But today, we've actually got a global industry with a global supply chain, with a framework of global safety standards under the auspices of the IAEA. Given the global context, regulators need to think and work differently, I think, as Mirella said before. The collaboration that we're here to talk about is an exemplar of how regulators should work together in today's modern world. It demonstrates that we are willing to do things differently, to ensure nuclear safety, but also to enable the desired outcomes of those that we regulate. Vendors and developers want to work as efficiently as possible, and that means they are seeking technology deployment of common designs multiple times across national boundaries and providing economies of scale that will bring the costs of safe nuclear energy down for communities. The deployment of a common, safe design is the goal of that collaborative effort between ONR, CNSC, and the US NRC, alongside our industry counterparts also here today. ONR, as the United Kingdom's independent nuclear regulator, is actually the new kid on the block in the collaboration, a recent addition to the effort on the work in assessing GE Hitachi's BWX-300 technology. I believe that as that recent addition, we do have a real opportunity to prove the concept of collaboration and the benefits of that technology-specific approach. We'll be able to provide evidence and a clear understanding of how a newcomer can actually come into the process, or someone come again at some point in the future, and make the best use of all the work that's done under the MOC arrangements, and thereby realise the benefits. Up until now, joint reports have been produced by the US NRC and CNSC. ONR will begin a growing contribution to the effort in terms of the assessments as we move deeper into our own generic design assessment process. But what I would say is we are not completely fresh to the process. We have observed the work and the exchanges of the various parties under the cooperation for a while before we were able to sign the MOC 12 months ago. That enabled us to understand what and how things work, what's been done, and that's not too dissimilar to PAA's approach where they are observing the process currently. We also recognise that the three countries involved are each at slightly different stages of the BWRX project, and hence at slightly different points regarding regulatory process. This requires respective regulators to work closely together and with the industry counterparts, but we've got to demonstrate flexibility, be constructive, and importantly, have an open mind. I've got to say that that has been our experience as we've come into the process. We've experienced a willingness to share and support us, and that clear commitment from everyone to allow us to grasp the opportunity presented. We're grateful to now for CNSC and US NRC for sharing reports that they've already completed on a number of topical areas. And you're going to try and utilise and leverage those reports, not doing the work again, but using the work, taking ownership of the conclusions from a technical point of view, but not actually having to do the detailed assessments. And that, I think, will allow us to pursue the efficient use of the resources in our own organisation, but also support efficiencies within the industry that we're regulating. Streamlines regulation for GE Hitachi and all the others involved, but at the same time, maintaining the required standards of safety. Great work's actually being done in these areas, and it's not our intention to come along to redo it or duplicate it. In terms of the future and future areas of topics to look at, we had a six-party group meeting yesterday, and again, across the 6 parties, we agreed those future areas of focus. What I would say, coming in, until now, the approach has been to focus on joint assessments. For me, the ambition has got to be a position where an assessment is undertaken by one of the regulators and used and adopted by the other 2. That's our intent from the work that's already been done by fellow regulators. And it's about maximising the opportunity to do an assessment once and use it many times across regulators. That will allow us to further develop our approach to sharing knowledge, improve efficiency and productivity. For those of you that are here today, please be assured that the process is working well. It's a collaborative and enabling approach across all the organisations that you see represented here. All parties committed to achieving the goals we have set out, which also extends, as I've said, to PAA and OSG, because they have ambitions with specific technology and they are being brought along to understand the process that's been adopted and how they may fit in it at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Our next speaker is Michelle Katz. Michelle is the Senior Vice President of Nuclear Programs at GE Hitachi. She has over 20 years of managerial and technical expertise in nuclear regulatory affairs and quality, including providing oversight, ensuring compliance with regulations, and recognizing, evaluating, and recommending controls for workplace risks and hazards. As Senior Vice President, She is responsible for ensuring the oversight and continuous improvement of world-class quality regulatory affairs. Prior to working at GE, she worked at the US NRC, in positions of increasing responsibility from resident inspector to policy advisor for a former chairman. She has recently been appointed the chair of the World Nuclear Association Cordell Working Group. You're going to tell us what Cordell is. Michelle earned her bachelor's degree in nuclear engineering from North Carolina State University, and she recently completed an MBA at the University of North Carolina in Wilmington. Michelle?
Thank you. I think I need to shorten that too. Okay, thanks everybody. The strong at heart have remained here at the RIC at the last day, so I appreciate everybody coming and getting up early for these presentations. As she said, my name is Michelle Katz. I've been at GE since 2018, and it was really the start of the BWRX 300 licensing. So got to really be there from the ground up, and it's been a very exciting journey so far and where we've come. I am also the chair of the World Nuclear Association Cordell Working Group. That is the Cooperation in Reactor Design Evaluation and Licensing Working Group. So there will be a test later on who remembers that. But this group has been around for a while, and they really saw the need for regulatory collaboration many years ago. So they've been working to really promote standardized designs that can be regulated or that can be approved around the world with minimal design changes. So if you look at construction of new reactors, really the couple of critical paths are your long lead items and licensing. And licensing can be very expensive. To license the number of reactors that we're looking at licensing, if you start from scratch in every country, we're looking in the billions, tens of billions of dollars in licensing costs. And that's really not sustainable for small modular reactors. And really the question is, do we need to start over from scratch every time we go to a new country or go to a new jurisdiction? So at GE Vernova, we are creating a new era of energy with our BWRX 300. It's our 10th generation of small modular reactor. It does blend advanced technology, but with decades of experience. We've been doing nuclear and nuclear reactors for a long time. Started with nuclear physics experiments in the 1930s. But it's not just about meeting today's energy needs. It's really about addressing global climate change. It's about electrifying the world. And it's about energy security. And when I go over to Europe, you hear a lot more about energy security, a very important part of it too. So our mission is clear. It's really to deliver safe, sustainable energy on a global scale. And what makes our reactor different is a Gen 3+ reactor. It is a passive reactor. It's inherently safe. It doesn't require any safety-related offsite electricity. It doesn't require human intervention for accidents or events. And it doesn't require any off-site safety-related ultimate heat sink. It's simple, it's inherently safe, and it's an important part of the design. But what also really stands out to me when I was thinking about global collaboration is not just what we're globally collaborating on now, but the fact that this was actually born of global collaboration in a global community. BWRs, we've operated those around the world for years. So we've taken all the operating experience from those designs, we've looked at regulations in many countries, and we've really created this decades of operating experience to incorporate the best practices and research and safety standards into our design. But in today's world, regulatory collaboration is key, as I said, to really deploy what we need to meet our climate goals, to meet our energy security goals. We are going to have to think differently. The partnership between the US NRC and Canada CNSC, it's really the forefront of regulatory collaboration. I go over to the IAEA, or the European Union, all have these different regulatory collaboration groups, and everybody is watching what is happening here between the NRC and CNSC, and it's a very exciting time, and they are really at the forefront. So I want to thank the NRC and the CNSC for taking on this endeavor. And it's hard. Regulatory collaboration is not easy. There's so many different scenarios that you could come up with, and you have to really have a flexible framework for being able to promote best practice sharing. So I was thinking about it, some of the examples are that you've actually heard about today. where one regulator is very familiar with the topic, like our fuel. We're using our GNF2 fuel. We have over 26,000 bundles operating, have operated in cores around the world. NRC is very familiar with it. It's a topic that CNSC wasn't familiar with, so NRC can help bring CNSC up to speed on that. In reverse, CNSC is very familiar with the IAEA's approach to safety strategy, which is what we've designed our reactor towards. They can help bring the NRC up to speed. But then there's also topics that neither regulator has familiarity with. Our diaphragm plate steel composite building materials. So they're both learning. This really helps deepen, I was thinking about this in general, like when you have all these different regulators that are looking at something, you have a much deeper knowledge base. You can optimize your resources, and it really accelerates the learning curve than having to start from scratch with a new topic every time a new topic comes before a regulator. The other thing I was thinking about when I was looking at this was, how do you collaborate? That's the question we get in a lot of these meetings. How do you have a process? And you really do have to have a flexible process for collaboration. And I understand the need for regulatory sovereignty. I worked at the NRC, and it's a very important part of the mission and of the job. But then I was thinking about when I used to inspect nuclear power plants, and we sampled. It was a sampling approach. We didn't look at 100% of everything when you were walking around a plant. We focused on what was the most important, what was the most safety significance, and what would have the most impact, and there was criteria to determine what we looked at. But we didn't review 100% of everything that happened at the power plant. It was a sampling. So if regulators can still have sovereignty, but incorporate a sampling approach to really focus on what is most important in their regulatory reviews. So one is really creating that process. And the other thing I thought about, we talked about yesterday, was documenting the conclusions, the methodology, and the conclusions for how they came to those conclusions. So for instance, if a new country comes on in the future, like Estonia, who might be new to nuclear and wants to take a conclusion from another regulator, they need to understand what was reviewed and how it was reviewed. Okay, so I think lastly, I just wanted to say that it's really good for, also regulatory collaboration is really good for getting some sort of regulatory certainty early on in the process. Vendors and licensees, they don't want to wait till further into a design review, if it's a design certification or construction permit application, to get regulatory certainty on specific topics. So the topics we've chosen to review here are really the key differences between our past designs, like our ESBWR and our BetaReg 300, to really get regulatory certainty on some of these topics early on before it goes into an application. And so if you have topics that you are looking for as a vendor, it's a great way to get those topics addressed early on. So in conclusion, when you look at BetaReg 300, it's not just a reactor. It really is a testament to global collaboration in design and in regulation, and a commitment to safety that has come together to really build a brighter and more sustainable energy future. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, we will hear from Kim Halvey, who is the General Manager of Nuclear Regulatory Affairs and Emergency Preparedness at the Tennessee Valley Authority. Her background includes nuclear fleet and site leadership roles. She has previously held roles in systems engineering, design engineering, fleet licensing, site compliance, and reactor engineering and fuels. Kim has a bachelor's degree in science in mechanical engineering and a master's of science degree in engineering management from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. She's a member of Women in Nuclear and serves as an advisor for the TVA WIN chapter, and is very active in science, technology, engineering, and math initiatives in her community. Kim?
Thank you. So I first want to apologize because the allergy season is upon us. So if my throat or my voice starts going out, I have my water with me, and I also appreciate, Marella, you and your staff for helping develop a contingency plan in case I needed to do this virtual, but I didn't have to do that, so I'm happy to be in person with you. But thank you for being proactive and helping me with that plan. So, but we'll do the best that we can because it started this week and I'm here for the long run for it. And we'll love those beautiful cherry blossoms when they actually do bloom, right? We'll love the spring. So I'm here from TVA, as mentioned, to kind of bring an industry perspective to this conversation. And as many of our utility peers, we are seeing an increase for demand in the Tennessee Valley region. And we need to replace some of our non-nuclear generating units that are reaching the end of their useful life. So one of the ways that we are addressing that is we are undertaking efforts to optimize our current power system. We're constructing a new state-of-the-art systems operations center in between Chattanooga and Knoxville there in Tennessee, refurbing our existing hydro fleet, investing in our existing nuclear fleet for life extension. But optimization can only take us so far. So we're going to have to bring new generation and storage opportunities into our power system to meet this growing demand. We have multiple initiatives underway to explore those technologies, and then we also have this, initiative in new nuclear. So we created the new nuclear program at TVA to explore potential new nuclear technology options for early 2030s and beyond. The program includes exploration of sites within our TVA service territory of potential new nuclear deployments. And of course, most of you are familiar and know we have the Clinch River nuclear site where we have an early site permit to support the deployment of SMRs. And really, this is instrumental to us, and it's important for us to be a part of this conversation because we have experience in this. We have a 7-unit operating fleet right now, decades of experience that we can bring to the table and bring to these conversations with the regulator collaboration. So we see significant benefit from standardization of future deployments of new nuclear technology, significant benefit to the fleet, to TVA as an enterprise, and to our customers. There's a potential for more rapid deployment of SMRs once that initial demonstration is complete. A standard plant also has potentially have fewer systems, so that means requiring less maintenance, less testing, allowing to further our current approach. Where, in our current operating fleet, we've been moving toward a fleet center approach to optimize our workforce. And a standard design fleet will then allow us to further optimize the workforce. Standardization also supports a strong supply chain for new technologies, active sharing of operating experience, and more efficient maintenance and refueling outage strategies through shared maintenance resources. Standardization, as already has been mentioned, is the key to this vision, and we have a vested interest in supporting regulator collaboration to achieve this vision. Historical practices and preferences regarding design features have the potential to drive differences on a country-by-country basis that could detract from this opportunity to have a widely deployed standard design. So our desire and approach in this effort is to support the regulator collaboration to provide practical examples of where regulatory guidance may drive unnecessary divergence to a standard design. We've been helping in this demonstration and this effort by identifying specific guidance where clarity on acceptable technical approaches can lead to a common basis for compliance in multiple countries. We see, as the industry group in this collaboration, is the most beneficial outcome of regulator collaboration would be a mutual agreement between regulators where ideally you have one regulator that accepts a design of another country that has approved a design, and that with minimal rework and a focused review of only the site-specific attributes and analyses for that design. But as it's already been mentioned, we understand that there are significant hurdles to achieve this. So today, we believe that most regulators have the flexibility in their current framework to review and accept different technical approaches to meet requirements. The best solution today, from our perspective, is a documented alignment on technical requirements to meet and demonstrate compliance. We've specifically seen this type of collaboration between the NRC and CNSC in the specific example of the diaphragm plate steel composite planned for the GE Hitachi BWRX-300. I'll end with the statement that we fully understand and appreciate the need to follow the country's specific licensing practices and processes, but knowing that a certain technical approach satisfies multiple regulators will better enable safe and efficient licensing of standard designs in multiple countries. And we greatly appreciate the collaboration of the NRC and CNSC thus far on the GE Hitachi BWRX 300 design. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Our last panelist is David Tyndall, who is Ontario Power Generation's Vice President of Nuclear Engineering. He's accountable for engineering oversight of the Darlington new nuclear project and technical oversight of OPG's nuclear growth portfolio. David has been with OPG for the past 18 years, and he worked in various engineering roles at multiple facilities, including Pickering, Darlington, and most recently in new nuclear development. Within new nuclear, David has led teams for technology assessment, siting, design optimization, and feasibility non-grid applications. Within the broader industry, David is active in the Canadian Standard Association, CANDU Owners Group, and is the industry chair of the Electric Power Research Institute's Advanced Nuclear Technology Program. David?
Thank you very much. And again, I'm proud to be here on behalf of Ontario Power Generation and as a Canadian utility and somebody who's an industry leader in moving first. So it takes courage to move first. And that's something that I think is something that our company possesses and we are actively building. So we've got a site that we are clearing land on. We've got shafts sunk. We have over 700 sea containers with tunnel boring machines and heavy lift cranes that are coming to our site right now. We are already fabricating the diaphragm pleat steel composite that's been mentioned as we look to get ready to lay the first nuclear plant build in a long time in Canada and the first of the SMRs in North America. And so this is a very exciting time, and you kind of go, how did you get here though? What gives you the confidence to be able to go ahead? Why are you going to take a leadership position? How do you end up in a spot where you have enough certainty to be able to make the investment? And so this journey didn't start a year ago. It didn't start 5 years ago. It started a long time ago for us. We've been working on new nuclear since about 2016. And that sounds like a long time, but we had to go and see what the market was. We had to understand how it came across. We had to pick a technology. We had 13 areas that we reviewed in picking a technology, and regulatory certainty was one of those items. And so it's through these types of collaborations and efforts and understanding as you look at things like novel technologies, or what is your goal and speed of deployment, because you have to invest a lot in that upfront regulatory piece. And so to be able to get there, we had to assess this. We had to interface with regulators in Canada. We had to interface with international regulators as a collaborative effort. And so to have the regulators come together is really, really strong in that many of these regulators have been either seen some of these technologies, they currently license some of these technologies. There's experience bases, there's research bases, and bringing that global research pool together, the global knowledge space, the perspectives, allows utilities and it allows investors to have more confidence in the regulatory and licensing schedule, timeline, and cost, which is all things that are important to being successful. So that's one of the criteria that we looked at in terms of just selecting a technology. And so we really appreciate the fact that the regulators come together, and whether you believe in regulatory harmonization as a unicorn or not, I call it the unicorn because I don't know if I ever believe that it will happen. But do I believe that you can get to the spot where we have common methodologies, common approaches for assessments, where a single analysis can be used in multiple jurisdictions to satisfy unique requirements? I absolutely believe it, and I've absolutely seen it as we've looked at some of the joint reports that have been issued and what those perspectives can bring. So it accelerates the learning curve. But why are utilities participating in this? Because we all have things that we can learn. So the best regulators are ones that listen, not just tell, right? And so it's about a discussion. They ultimately will grant or not grant a license because there's a trust. And that trust is on both sides of what it comes down to. There's facts and there's trusts. And that comes down to demonstrating. And so how do you build that? It's through knowledge and experience and healthy discussion, through debate. And those debates are strengthened by collaboration because you have a knowledge base and an assessment. So just as we look forward, this is the start, is the BWRX 300, right? And we saw Greg's slide that looks at all these other technologies. So this is demonstrating, and it's trailblazing to not just enable this technology, but also other technologies. So it is an important step. So while we're here to talk a lot about the BWRX 300 and the collaboration that we have there, this is really about leading the industry, and it's changing the face of how regulation, how utilities collaborate, because we too can learn from one another. So this isn't just about, everything that GE tells us is perfect. No, we get to challenge them because we get to bring that up, right? We get to challenge them as an experienced operator. We get to challenge the regulators because we've seen these things work in other jurisdictions. We get to have that healthy debate by educating ourselves through collaboration and also bringing newcomers. So we think about the collaboration with folks like Orlen Synthos Green Energy, not a nuclear company, but they will be, and they ask a lot of really good questions. And so it takes all of us to do a global industry. It's taking all of us to listen, to collaborate, to learn, to teach, and to share, and that starts with this effort here, I think. So I'll end my comments there.
Thank you, David. So one homework for me, go home and Google diaphragm plate steel composite, right? Because 3 panelists mentioned it, it must be important. But I wanted to, and frankly, I told you, sometimes I'm the last one to notice a benefit. So the benefit of collaboration between regulators has been discussed in many fora. But what strikes me about this group is the fact that it brings not only the regulators at the table, but it also brings the designer and the owner-operator. So the assumption of risk is very clear in this grouping. I'm going to start sort of a panel discussion. I'm seeing the questions that are coming in, and they are wonderful. But there are a few things that I'd like the panelists to discuss before we get to your questions. So the first question that I'm going to ask is for Sarah and Greg. The memorandum has an established process to enable close collaboration in the development of joint reports. Can the NRC and CNSC describe the process of implementing the cooperation and how it evolved over time? Sarah, if you don't mind starting us.
Thanks very much, Marella. Happy to start. And so contrary to what you might read in the news, Canada and US are actually very good partners. One might say that I am 25% happier to be here today than I would have been previously. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But our collaboration has been long-standing, and so we have a long relationship with the NRC in collaborating on a number of issues, on a number of operating facilities, et cetera. And in 2017, we decided to sign a memorandum of cooperation with the NRC, which allowed us to have closer collaboration on advanced reactors, small modular reactors. And that allowed us to be able to establish a process for how we are going to work together. And like all relationships, it starts small, starts with a couple meetings here and there, to where we get to today, where we have a trilateral cooperation with ourselves, with the NRC, and then also we brought in the ONR. And our teams are working very, very closely. Our staff will talk about how they are just as comfortable reaching out to a colleague at the ONR or the NRC as they are reaching out to their own colleagues in their own organization. And so we have a subcommittee that helps us sort of have the governance of having close collaboration. That subcommittee meets regularly, anywhere between every 4 to 6 weeks. That subcommittee's responsibilities is to look at what's in front of us. What are the work plans that we want to do? What are the shared challenges that we're having? What are the shared technologies that we are reviewing? To ensure that our collaboration is strategic. Because we can talk about all things, we can compare approaches in all aspects, but we really want to ensure that the collaboration that we're doing supports an end goal and supports, continuing towards standardized designs or harmonization of approaches. And so when we look at what the outputs of the collaboration are, there are joint reports. They are very interesting. Many of them are very long, very interesting, very detailed reports, which outline sort of common areas, maybe some areas of divergence, which are really helpful to designers as they're looking towards multiple country deployments. It allows us to be able to document any concerns or questions that we have, maybe common questions that we may have, which will help, in our perspective, be able to give us that opportunity to leverage regulatory reviews, to be able to find efficiency in regulatory reviews. And we've also had the opportunity to do joint vendor inspections, which allows us to have two regulators doing an inspection of a facility to be able to look at how each other would, conducts the activity, but also to learn from those lessons. And so ultimately, our goal is to find efficiency in our regulatory reviews. It is to work together on areas that make sense to work together. And we have some guiding principles that help us determine what makes sense for a project. And so those guiding principles are that, we need a reactor designer that's keen and interested, and that has multiple countries that they're working for to ensure that we can have an effective collaboration. We need to all commit to having staff, commit the resources to be able to do the collaboration in a timely fashion. And we have to commit to sharing the lessons learned. As we work through the different projects, if we all have our own experiences that we aren't sharing with others, there's an opportunity for us to be able to share that with others and to ensure that we're learning from that. And the last piece is that this information costs money. It costs money for the vendor to be able to provide it. And so ensuring that we have the necessary protection measures in place to control that information is key. So I think I'll pass it to Greg to add from there.
You covered so much. I'm not sure I have much to add. But the one thing you're probably all sick of hearing the word collaboration, but I will offer this. The process for collaborating on projects involves collaboration. So we work very closely with the industry and with our fellow regulators to ensure that we're picking the right projects to collaborate on. We want to make sure that we're not going to collaborate on something that's going to interfere with industry progress. If there's something going on in Canada or in the UK that us becoming involved in is not going to help progress, that might not be a good candidate for collaboration. So it is a process that involves all six parties you see at the table here today. The other thing I'll mention is we have learned lessons from the last many years of collaborating. We've learned how to, there have been some issues with handling sensitive information between the countries, making sure that we can share information easily between the different regulators, and we've addressed that. We've had, Sarah alluded to resources. We've learned that, taking on a significant number of projects to review collaboratively can be a challenge for regulators that might be a resource challenge. So making sure we're targeting the right things is a very important lesson that we've learned. And then we've had a lot of good lessons on how we manage our work, the content of the reports we issue, improving those, optimizing them. I think we have, based on our meeting yesterday, we have some additional ways we may be able to optimize our reports to make them more useful for other countries that are embarking. So again, collaboration is a collaborative process, and it is one that's evolving. We're going to continue to learn lessons and adjust our process as we go forward.
So I'm going to intersperse an audience question here. Could you give an order of magnitude of the targeted timeline to issue the joint report of projects under review? 1-2 years, 3-4 years, more?
That one's got my name on it. I saw. I was reading your screen over there as you were.
I think it has both your names on it.
So I hate to answer a very good question with it depends, but it does depend a bit on it depends on the topic of the joint review. One thing we do strive to do in all cases is to meet the industry's needs. So if there's a desire to collaborate on a project, we'll hear what the industry's needs are and we'll try to meet that. I would say the direct answer to the question, Less than 1 year would be what I would expect. I would not expect the project to take 3 or 4 years. That is not what I find it hard to believe that would meet the industry's needs. But it is dependent on the project, and I would say 1 year or less is nominally what it would take. I don't know if Sarah or Mark, you want to add anything?
Not particularly from my perspective. I think there was a generic design assessment process, which is what we're following to do the assessment of the technology. We publish all our reports in due course. So as we go through what we call step 1, step 2, and then step 3 is the detailed technical assessment, all the reports that we use to come to a decision we actually put on the website. And for the GE Hitachi technology, we're in step 2, and the end of that will be within, definitely within the next 12 months or so.
So my next question is for David and Kim. The memorandum was created to facilitate international regulatory cooperation. Can you expand on how this framework directly and indirectly benefits the industry? What challenges has the industry observed and overcome through participation in this process?
Okay, I'll start. So our direct benefit that we're seeing is the collaboration between the NRC and the CNSC is an aligned guidance that can help as we continue working on our construction permit application. So specific ways that we're going to be able to meet NRC's licensing process for that. Indirectly, of course, the benefit there is, enabling the potential future use of a standard design in both of our countries is that benefit.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think directly has been, to Kim's point, is really around that aligned guidance and the common approaches. That's where we've seen it. But at the table and being part of the six parties coming together and having that discussion, it's allowing us to also express what's important to us. Where do we see risk? What do we see as being an item where we would benefit from either a common approach or some unified thinking, or that we think, I'll say selfishly, maybe one regulator has a better idea than the other regulator on how they've approached something either in the past or what they're currently working on, and they can learn from one another. So this is about making everybody better, not just about, deploying. It's also how do we get everybody better faster? So nuclear, everybody's saying we want to have that nuclear build out. That takes people, it takes resources. So that's the indirect benefit, is that we're also being able to have a lot more people come up to speed quicker. And I talked about the risk. We talk about risk in project deployment, speed, time is money, all of those types of concepts. And how do you do that? It's about influencing which topics get reviewed. So that's a key item, as well as what information is going to be required. And so we're doing a set of reports once. When you're designing reactors and deploying reactors, people are busy. And so having to do the same report 3 or 4 different times, it's not effective. It's distracting people from actually building. So at some point, really getting a common approach, that's really where we're seeing these benefits come in. We know what we have to give, and we can have, whether it's ourselves or the designer in GE, preparing one report that is going to satisfy independent needs. So we've seen that work.
I think another indirect benefit, David, is we're also, setting the stage for the next technology that's going to be going through this process, right? So we're setting the processes. We'll have lessons learned from this collaboration and us working together that we'll be able to apply, outside of this technology, but for the next technology as well.
Agreed.
So this is again a question for both Sarah and Greg, but I'll start with Greg. In the early days of the memorandum, ONR was participating as an observer and absorbing knowledge. What was the decision factor or criterion that contributed to expand the collaboration from bilateral to trilateral?
So I'll just highlight 2 elements, that make the collaboration effective. First is there's interest of a vendor in all 3 of our countries. So, in order for much of the work we do on various topics are design specific. So The fact that GEH, the design, was being deployed in all 3 countries, that was a kind of an entry gate for ONR to join us in the collaboration. The other thing, and it's very important, is that we're peer regulators. We have similar levels of expertise. We can rely on each other. Clearly, that's another entry gate into the collaboration, is just that we are peer regulators with similar expertise, similar experiences that we can leverage. We can leverage each other. We're not, Canada's not bringing us along. We're working together on things. Same with ONR. They're working with us as peers. So I think those are the 2 main elements I would point to that kind of led to ONR joining us. I would offer if Mark or Sarah want to add anything to that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Greg. I think for myself, it was definitely much more around having like-minded regulators come together on a specific technology. And as Greg has said, it's about making sure it's technology specific. We couldn't enter the process for quite a period of time because we didn't have a particular reactor technology that allowed that mutual cooperation. So once the UK and GE Hitachi came together and were looking to progress the project, that's when we could enter into it. So thank you.
Mark, there's a little follow-up question here on what was it like to sort of join the collaboration on a different timetable?
Wonderful. No, I actually covered some of it in my opening remarks. We found it open, supportive, welcoming across all the members of the collaboration. I think Greg said it is a collaborative effort. It's not just regulators, it's all the other parties you see around the table here. I think we were definitely helped by being an observer first. It allowed us to see what was taking place, the types of discussions that were being held, and the topics that were being selected for that. Much more detailed scrutiny by the regulators, and we could express our opinion even though we were just observers in the process. But immediately we were able to sign the MOC 12 months ago. We then took advantage and leveraged work that had already been done by NRC and CNSRC in relation to BWRX 300, but also in relation to Holtec's SMR 300 as well, and getting access to certain papers that had already been produced there. In terms of trying to accommodate the different timescales, I think I've mentioned a couple of times about being open-minded. We've got to be flexible and understanding. But I think what we also need to recognise is that Canada is probably leading the process, and there are some hard and fast programmes being established, budgets being established. So we do, even though we're all at different stages, have to be mindful of that particular lead approach. And also recognising that we are the newcomer in relation to the process. Yesterday we discussed about developing a flowchart or a route map in relation to the process, so it sets out everything clearly in terms of how it works and how the interdependencies function. And that will help in the future if any of us want to go back and look at what was done and why, but it will also help any other regulator or indeed a developer in another country to better understand the process and how they can take advantage of the work.
So I'm going to inject another audience question here. Are there provisions and/or expectations for more nations to join the MOC? I think this is a very important topic, and I hope that all the panelists can provide their contributions to this. Let me start. Michelle wants to start. Michelle's reaching for the mic.
I'll start. You want to echo everything that's been said so far. When we're developing these new processes, with the IAEA or WNA, it's always, well, how do you bring in new regulators into this process, right? The NRC and CNSC have been doing a great job collaborating, but how do you bring in new ones? The ONR is a great example. They started as an observer, but everybody's on a different path in their nuclear journey, right? So ONR has nuclear reactors, a lot of experience with nuclear reactors. And so it was easy to move from the observer role to really becoming a reviewer. And we are seeing really a lot of progress in our generic design assessment through the UK. And then also, bringing in PAA, the Polish regulator, along with our partner in Poland, OSGE, they're in a different part of their nuclear journey. They don't have nuclear power plants, but they're getting up to speed very quickly. And so they're coming in now as an observer, and they get to really gain insights from the work that's being done on the very specific topics, which is very helpful. So who's next? And it all depends. And it really depends on a couple things. You know, with our BWRX 300, we're in the final down slugs for a number of countries, right? We're in competitions in Sweden and Finland and all over the world. So if we see, you know, if we get progress, if we win these down slugs, then we would want to bring in, obviously, other regulators. You know, we've had discussions on doing a European review through the EU, doing something through the European Industrial Alliance, do a joint review through European countries. So we'll see what happens. It depends on how things play out. It really depends on the business case. But for us, like Mark said, it's important to focus on the countries, to really focus our attention on the countries that we are deploying in first.
So I think that the benefit of the collaboration has allowed, you know, from a Canadian perspective, allowed us to gain some real great insights from the NRC on how they've regulated boiling water technologies. And so when you think about newcomers or other countries who may want to join, when they would join, it will all depend on where the next project is. And so from a Canadian perspective, if country X were to show up and say, okay, we'd like to collaborate, they will be joining at a point where there may very well be construction ongoing. There may be construction ongoing in multiple countries. And so I think you have to look at where the benefit comes from, both the regulator who's giving their time to support the collaboration, and then also the needs of the newcomer regulator. And so as Mark mentioned, we talked yesterday about how do you bring, everyone asks for efficiency. How do you bring efficiency to the collaboration? And I think it really is creating a documented process that allows another regulator to directly leverage the review of another. And that's, I think, where the collaboration will expand. And when you have a standardized design and everyone is committed to a standardized design, is to say, okay, this is how we looked at it. This is the areas where, you know, from a national perspective, you may want to have a look at this area. This is an area where we kind of struggled. Here's how we worked through that area. That's more beneficial to a newcomer than saying, well, this is the first joint report that we did. Here's a second joint report that we did. Is to be able to give them something that they can actually take and then implement.
And maybe I'll just jump in from a utility perspective and say, like, we've done a lot of focus right now, and it's the right thing to do for this phase, is where we're talking about how we construct, how we build power plants. Very shortly, we're going to be talking about how do you operate and maintain new power plants. And so as we think forward, there is a world, and there will be a world, where some of the support centers are global, not just, you know, dealing with one utility or one fleet. They will be centralized support services. And so you can't have different programs. Data is powerful. We recognize that. We acknowledge it. And so being able to have common approaches, common design, common inspection programs, those types of things allow a lot more data. They improve safety and they improve reliability, but will require common approaches. And so I just offer that this is a lot of conversation today about how do we construct plants. The next conversations will be around how do we operate and maintain, and that collaboration will need to continue through that phase.
Yeah, one thing I'll add, this is kind of building on what Sarah mentioned. I think I mentioned before, the UK, Canada, the NRC are very much peer regulators. We have similar expertise. If a country is looking to join the work under the MOC, we will be looking for something similar from that country, someone who's able to do independent work that we can draw on to make our regulatory conclusions in our country. Obviously, there's a lot of countries in a lot of different places when it comes to preparing their regulatory framework, and there are other ways we can support those countries if it's needed that don't involve the MOC. For example, you know, we have lots and lots of opportunities there. So I think it's really important that we meet the regulators where they are, help them to be successful, and you know, if the MOC is not it's not a panacea. There's some limitations to how it works. So, but there are other mechanisms to help if help is needed. I muted you. Not the first time.
Not the first time he muted me. I reciprocated a couple of times too, many times. So there are a couple of questions I want to switch later on to how this can benefit the greater community beyond the BWRX 300. But there are a couple of questions and one that we actually prepared for the panel that go to the examples of benefits, tangible examples of benefits of these collaboration. Greg and Sarah, I think that you're in the best position to start, but everybody else can chime in.
Yeah, sure. So Mark made a comment that bringing like-minded regulators together is what the MOC is all about. And I think, so instead of giving a concrete example of a specific thing that we've benefited from, I think the benefit that I see as the biggest is the kind of almost the cultural, I'm going to ramble a bit, that the cultural benefits we see from it. You know, sharing, the NRC has historically operated not in a silo, but we haven't done anything like this before, and I think it really is helping us change our culture for advanced reactor reviews to be one that's much more integrated with the rest of the international community, where we're not kind of holding on to things, we're drawing heavily on work that's done by other countries where we haven't done that in the past. So that, for me, that is what I think is the biggest benefit to us. It's really a more cultural. We can work together collaboratively with other countries. We can, hopefully we get to a point where we can actually directly leverage the work that was done and not have to re-review things that were reviewed by the UK or by Canada. So that's what I see as the biggest benefit. Again, Sarah, I know, will have a much more eloquent answer than that. She always does.
Well, it's my birthday, so of course I will. So I think that we have a lot of concrete examples of where the collaboration has helped us. There are some novel aspects to the BWRX 300 that just Canada didn't have experience with. And so to be able to have a workshop, you know, with 5 or 6 NRC staff where the ONR is observing, for us to be able to ask naive questions, simple questions, to kind of understand, gain a better understanding of how they've approached these issues in the past has been very beneficial. As a regulator, you have a lot of capacity, you have a lot of capability, you have experts in many fields. But you also need, I always call it to phone a friend. Like, it sometimes is lonely to be a regulator. You don't have the same, and you have industry groups that can support, you know, yes, we have the IAEA, but sometimes you need to say, like, am I wrong here? And to be able to go to another regulator that has a lot of experience in this area, has, you know, similar capacity and capability, and just say, but what about this? And for them to be able to walk you through how they, you know, what their first challenges of dealing with a technical issue and then walking through those aspects has been really beneficial. And to see from the NRC's perspective, you know, in planning, we have not constructed a nuclear power plant in Canada, I'm going to say back to my birthday, since around when I was born. And so there's so many aspects that both the ONR and the NRC have been able to be able to share on how they have built their compliance verification plans that gives us more confidence in our plans. And knowing that you can build on what worked for somebody or what didn't work for them, to be able to say, okay, we're not starting from scratch. We have an area where we can begin from, and a framework to start with is very, very beneficial.
Just quickly from a UK perspective, we're looking to get some significant efficiencies from the collaboration. So our generic design assessment process, where we've applied it for gigawatt scale reactors, has taken 5 years. That's not acceptable. We recognise it's not acceptable, and we're looking at ways of actually accelerating that process while still getting the same levels of assurance. And by utilising work that has already been done, you know, some of the areas that we've identified, we can use the topical reports that have already been produced or in the process of being finalised around construction techniques, fuel verification and validation, and the means of shutdown. And then the 3 areas that we talked around yesterday about that future focus of the collaboration around I&C and EPZs, and I know Michelle was keen to look at practical elimination. I think they are 3 really strong topics where we get alignment. It will allow some significant progress in the confidence of the reactor design.
Yeah, and from, you know, again, bring the utility perspective to the table. There are things as we look to build the future fleets as well, there are unique tests that will be done on first and second reactors. And so those can be observed. There's really no reason why they couldn't be observed by all of the regulators to understand how the tests occur. right? How they've done, how they accept, understand it. I think the other thing is, and what it takes is, the regulators have to have strong leaders. And we see that in the peers at this table in terms of the leadership capability, because in the absence of information, specialists tend to default to being conservative, or they ratchet one another up. Oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? And we get this requirement stack. And that's not a slight on them at all. It's just that's how we're bred, like that's what we've taught them. That's the culture of it. So the strong leadership of, hold on, before we do this, let's phone a friend, let's have a reasonable discussion, let's have the regulatory strength. That question about, am I nuts here? No, you're correct, and these are the right questions to be asked, this is how we think about it, are vital to hold us all accountable. So I think it takes strong leaders within our regulators and making sure we have those people to be able to make this collaboration successful, but also look forward to those, the topics Mark mentioned.
The other benefit from industry to industry, like us being peers now, we are already benchmarking you more in our operating fleet than we did ever before. So it's building on relationships that this opportunity has provided us. You guys are constructing first, and so we'll have those lessons learned from that initial build. We'll continue. You talked about a little bit ago, David, around what the sharing of operating experience and the shared resources when we get into an operation mode. I mean, the workforce is going to look, it has a potential to look very different than what it does today upon shared resources and shared operating experiences across the world, across country to country. I mean, we already have that some, but this is just growing exponentially because of these collaboration efforts.
I want to add one thing from a vendor perspective. And we do see the intangible benefits, the training, the culture, the discussions, people, the regulators coming up to speed faster on topics. But we're also seeing tangible benefits as a vendor. Like Mark said, the generic design assessment process in the UK usually is 5 years. We expect that to be pulled in part because of the regulatory collaboration. That is a time saving for a vendor. And also, if you think about any novel approaches you have for your design, you're going to have to address those in every jurisdiction you go to. So you can do it at once, or you can do it each country you go into. It's going to happen either way. It will be much faster if you do it at once, get all the people on board, and then like Mark said earlier, once something's approved, using that process and having that shared assessment approved once, and then be able to be used in other countries. So you're going to have to do it. It helps if you do it all at once, but we are seeing actual tangible benefits and time savings.
So we're talking a lot about benefits and the nice things about the collaboration, but our audience is going to keep us honest with two questions. One is, and allow me to read them both because I see them as connected. Where there are technical issues where the regulators do not agree, are there any, and how do we resolve them? And then the second question related is, for regulatory differences between the three regulatory bodies that result in design changes for a particular reactor, are there efforts to close those technical regulatory differences that you can cite as an example? Told you it's a hard question.
No, I'll take the first question. So one of the topics that we agreed yesterday was instrumentation and control. And I think many people recognize that ONR's position has been the need for demonstration of diverse I&C systems. And that's manifests itself in the UK with a hardwired system and a digital system. But the discussion yesterday was about what we require is robust demonstration of diverse systems. And so that's what we're looking for. And I think we're all agreed that that's the approach that should be adopted. That's why it's one of the topics that we're going to focus on. We recognise that there'll be challenges around it, but it's about working together to get a completely agreed and aligned position on that particular topic, that topical area. And there's a commitment across the regulators that not one regulator will ask for a specific design change. We have to be agreed collectively on that assessment and the conclusions of it.
So obviously I agree with everything that Marcus said. And I think the other aspect is what we've seen from the collaboration is we have similar technical questions. And the basis for the questions may differ. It may differ from what's the regulatory framework that allows us to sort of pose the question. The evidence that we need to be satisfied may be different in countries. It's just the nature of the regulatory framework. It's the nature of the exemption process versus a more goal-based process that we have at the CNSC and at the ONR. And so from what we found is the technical issues generally remain the same. The same questions are being asked. The resolution of those issues may be different. It may be the evidence to support one decision may be a little bit different than the other regulator. And so we haven't seen a regulatory difference. I have here like the effort to close the gap. And so I think that we all have confidence in our regulatory approaches that we're committed to a standard design that has a reasonable or adequate level of safety for all 3 jurisdictions. And so there's different ways that you're going to get there. The path is not going to be the same. The regulatory frameworks are not the same. And so it's more of understanding where the other regulator is coming from for their question and the level of effort it is to answer the questions, because sometimes the level of effort is different. But we haven't seen anything in our review, and we've identified a number of technical challenges of the design and areas where we still need more information. But we haven't found any area where we've said we're totally misaligned here, and this won't work. It's more our approach to a conditional approval may be different, and I think that's okay. I think it stems from the experience that your regulatory framework has and how it's been developed. And being able to discuss how you come to a question and what the information need to be satisfied actually does support risk-informed decision-making.
Yeah, everything you said is in line with what I was going to say, fortunately. It seems to me, and I'm relatively new compared to Sarah, that most of the challenges we're experiencing are associated with regulatory framework more so than technical. And the NRC has a 50-year regulatory framework that was developed, and there is some rigidity to it, but there's also a lot of flexibility, and there's a lot of things we can do to accommodate different approaches. So I think if we get to a place where we agree on technical aspects of a design, and I think that's where we're generally getting to, we can figure out how to fit things into our regulatory framework, and I'm sure the same applies to Canada and the UK. So again, regulatory challenges seem to me to be the thing that we're working through, but I think we're generally effectively working through those kind of issues.
So I'm going to do another practical question from the audience, which is, does industry primarily interface with the group through the memorandum, or are there individual interactions with each regulatory body?
It's both. You have to, as a licensee, you've got to deal directly with the regulator in your jurisdiction. And then we also have the ability to have a conversation because we collaborate with one another as utilities, and we routinely have a conversation about, here's what we're hearing from, what we're hearing, and here's what we're hearing. Generally, they're aligned because our regulators are also talking. So when you start to see some of the wording that comes across in either a response or a question or an RFI that comes from the regulator, we're starting to see the same question. Right? It's not a different question. It's not different words. It's the same words. And so that is how we know things are flowing and we're having those conversations, right? So I think that's a strong area of what this is leading to is more certainty, similar words, similar questions to allow us to advance in one approach. And it allows us not to distract the designer that is actively working to complete and support construction activities, right? And that's another thing from a resource perspective. This is about how do we do things efficiently on all sides.
Ditto.
So I want to switch in the few remaining moments, I want to switch towards beyond this particular memorandum and talk in general about 2 topics. Mark, you have experience with NHI and New World, so how does the cooperation under this MOU, this Memorandum of Cooperation, compare, inform other similar activities?
Thanks, Marilla. In terms of the NUARD cooperation, ONR wasn't particularly involved in the middle of that, but besides the regulators here, we do talk to our colleagues in Europe as well. They're interested in how this collaboration is going, and we're also interested in terms of how Finland, France, and other colleagues in other national regulators are dealing with that NUARD reactor design. Now, it did stumble quite a while ago now, probably around 12 months ago, excuse me. But it's very much along the same lines, the same principles. It's around collaboration, regulators coming together to get that mutual understanding in relation to the design and adopt a common position as best they can. So quite a similar process, but not the same, involving different regulatory bodies and different regulatory frameworks. Instead, in terms of NESI, that's the Nuclear Harmonization and Standardization Initiative within the agency in Vienna. It was DG Gross's initiative initially. It's got 2 tracks to it. They are separate tracks. My view is they should come together a little bit more regularly. So you have a regulatory track and you have an industry track. The difference here, and why we believe we'll get a better chance of success initially, is that it's a smaller group of like-minded regulators coming together. If I just talk about the regulatory track under NESI, potentially 40 regulators in the room. The agency's approach is consensus. You try and get consensus across 40 regulators, bit of a difficult challenge to me. But it's all about the same thing, the goal, that effective global deployment of safe and secure advanced nuclear reactors. Very much the same principles, minimizing their work, doing it once and being able to use it across many different national boundaries. The industry track, again, is around codes and standards and looking for a range of other things in that regard. How this particular collaboration can inform that initiative, I think there's recognition and there's a pull from the agency for us to take an opportunity at some point in the future to come in and demonstrate this as an effective case study that they can perhaps learn from. So it's 3 organisations at the moment from a regulatory perspective. It may grow. It may grow again. We will move off because we'll have done our design assessment, but the enduring record of what we have done, the assessments will remain, and others will come along and want to utilise that. So it is a good case study, and I think it's the best way to go forward initially around the collaboration.
Can I add one? Yeah. As the chair of the World Nuclear Association Cordell Working Group, it's really important that the benefits that we are learning here can really be used for other projects in the future. And so, like Mark said, NHSI and different initiatives have created, frameworks or processes, but they haven't been tested really. So this is the benchmark. This is the example. This is the real project that's going through the process. It's bringing in different regulators at different stages. It's seeing how they collaborate. It's seeing how they document. It's the flow map of how these things work. This is the real example that can then be used for what's been created in these other working groups to see what works and what doesn't. So this will be a benefit for other vendors, that go through these processes and all these processes that are being developed as a benchmark.
I heard Mark talk about the commonality of thought among the regulators at this table versus the broader objectives and perspective of regulators who are participating in NESI. But you also mentioned the other distinction. This group is actually regulators, designers, and owners-operators who are working together and are exchanging information live, which I also think is a great advantage. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it is. That's the point I was making in relation to, with NESI, there are 2 separate tracks. Yes, you've got to do some thinking in your own camps, but you've got to come together and share that thinking and development. I think for me, what I would say is, the last word from me is that please be under no illusion, it's not just the 3 regulators here that are looking to collaborate and cooperate and reduce the burden on the industry. It's the nuclear regulators globally that want to do that. That's how things have changed. So you are pushing at an open door.
So I'm not going to try to squeeze another question in. I'm going to just thank this wonderful panel for being so thoughtful and so well prepared, and for taking the really good questions that our audience has asked. I think the success of this effort, like Mark said, is going to be evident when somebody other than the US, Canada, and the UK is building a BWRX 300. So on that note, there's tea and coffee and cookies for Sarah's birthday just outside here. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panel, and thank you all for participating in the RIC.